He was just a small-town guy, the kind of man who always paid with coins, wore the same jacket for years, and never dreamed too big. His name was Eric. 34 years old, worked nights at a gas station, and lived in his late grandmother's house. His life was quiet, sometimes too quiet, but stable. He didn't hate it, but deep down he always wondered if life had more to offer. That thought stayed buried until the numbers matched. It was a rainy Tuesday when everything changed. Eric stopped by the corner store after work, grabbed a coffee, and on a whim bought a lottery ticket with his last $10. Just a habit, nothing more. But when the results came out the next night, the screen lit up with numbers that looked familiar. He checked again. Then again, it hit him like a freight train, $112 million. Just like that, the world shifted beneath his feet. News spread fast. His phone rang non-stop. Old classmates he hadn't seen in years were suddenly just checking in. By Friday, he'd quit his job, bought a brand new truck, and flown to Vegas. He didn't even pack a bag, just left everything behind: the house, the job, his routines, all gone. In his mind, poor Eric was already a character from another life. Now he was rich Eric, untouchable, important, but something subtle changed in him too. At first it was excitement, then ego, then detachment. The man who used to stretch $20 for a week now scoffed at anything under $5,000. He started seeing people as workers, not as humans. Advice from his mum: ignored. Concern from his cousin: dismissed. With each dollar spent, his connection to his old self faded, like a photo left out in the sun. Within 2 weeks, Eric had moved into a gated mansion in the Hollywood Hills. Marble, floors, an infinity pool, staff on call 24/7. It was everything he thought success should look like, the kind of place he used to see on TV and joke about. Now it was his. And with that new address came a new version of himself, polished, flashy, and quick to forget where he came from. His old friends from town reached out, but he stopped answering their messages. When Jake, his best friend since grade school, drove 3 hours just to surprise him, Eric barely let him pass the front gate. "It's not personal," he said. "We just live in different worlds now." Jake left hurt and confused. Eric told himself it was necessary. He couldn't build his new life with people who reminded him of his old one. He filled the silence with expensive toys: a Lamborghini in electric blue, a custom wardrobe, private chefs, nights out with strangers who praised him for picking up every tab. He mistook their smiles for respect. He liked being the most important person in the room. It fed something in him that had long felt small. But in chasing that feeling, he pushed away the people who knew him best. Soon his phone was full of names he didn't really know. Contacts with emojis, not memories. Conversations felt shallow. Laughter didn't last. Still, he told himself this was what winning looked like, what freedom felt like. But late at night, in that giant echoing house, something didn't sit right. He had more than he'd ever imagined, and somehow it still didn't feel like enough. Eric's mansion became known as the place where the party never stopped. Nights bled into mornings, DJs, champagne towers, celebrity drop-ins. Every week something bigger, louder, flashier. He thought he was building a life people envied, but all he was really doing was renting attention. The more he spent, the more people showed up, but none of them knew his middle name or cared. He started dating women who looked like magazine covers, models, influencers, actresses with perfect smiles and hollow interest. They praised him publicly, but barely looked at him when the cameras were off. When he tried opening up about his past, they changed the subject or scrolled their phones. He gave them gifts, bags, jewelry, trips, hoping to earn something real. But every "I love you" felt thinner than the paper on the receipts. There were moments, brief and quiet, where the truth would hit him. Like when he'd walk through his house after a party and see champagne stains on the marble. People passed out on designer couches, and not a single face he trusted. Or when he'd lie in bed next to someone and still feel completely alone. But instead of slowing down, he sped up, spent more, partied harder, pushed the thoughts away. He told himself this was just a phase, that maybe happiness was just one big event away. Maybe the next party, the next girl, the next car would finally make the feeling go away. But it never did. The hole inside him only got louder, and no matter how much money he threw into it, it stayed empty. Eric's younger sister, Megan, flew out to see him after hearing rumors from back home. She found him lounging by the pool with strangers, sipping cocktails at noon on a Tuesday. She pulled him aside and said what no one else dared to, "You're burning through it too fast." He chuckled, kissed her on the forehead and said, "Relax, Meg. There's plenty more where that came from." His accountant, a quiet man named Leonard, had been trying for months to get Eric to take his calls seriously. He showed him numbers, charts, projections. "At this rate," Leonard warned, "you'll be broke in 3 years, maybe less." Eric waved it off with a smirk. "Leonard, I won the lottery. I don't need to worry about math anymore." He treated concern like it was jealousy. His mom called less often, but when she did, she begged him to slow down. "Just think ahead," she said gently. "Buy a house you can keep. Set some aside. You've been given a gift." Eric hated those calls. They reminded him of who he used to be. He didn't want limits. He didn't want advice. He wanted the music loud, the drinks flowing, the credit cards swiping. Deep down, there was a flicker of doubt. But it was easier to drown that out with noise and new toys. He convinced himself the money was endless, like a river that would never run dry. And anyone who thought otherwise was just too small-minded to understand how big his life had become. So he kept going, kept spending, kept laughing, all while the edge crept closer. It started with a dip in the market, just a little downturn, nothing major. But Eric had poured millions into risky stocks and trendy startups he barely understood. His financial advisor warned him months ago, but he never listened. "It'll bounce back," Eric said, sipping a $200 smoothie. But this time, it didn't bounce, it crumbled. And with it, so did everything he thought was secure. One by one, his investments vanished. A tech company folded. A real estate deal turned sour. A can't-miss crypto project disappeared overnight. His phone, once buzzing with invites, and praise went silent. The people who once clung to him like glitter at a party, gone. They moved on to the next millionaire in town. Not one goodbye, not one thank you. Just silence. Bills piled up. Credit cards maxed. His mansion, leased and overpriced, was suddenly up for auction. Luxury cars were towed away. The once booming lifestyle dried up faster than he imagined. For the first time, he opened his banking app and stared at a number he never thought he'd see again. 0. His chest tightened. His hands shook. It didn't feel real until it was. Standing alone in his empty living room, Eric realized he had built his world on sand. All that money, all that noise, it was never real power. It just covered the cracks for a little while. Now, with nothing left to hide behind, he was forced to face what he'd been running from the entire time. Eric packed what was left of his life into a beat-up pickup and drove back to his hometown. No more private jets, no more valet parking, just miles of silence and regret. The same streets that once cheered his big win now felt colder, quieter. At the gas station, an old neighbor glanced his way, then looked down. The shame stung deeper than the loss itself. He moved into a small rental near his childhood home. No one came to visit, no welcome party, just whispers at the grocery store and long, uncomfortable stares. "That's the guy who blew the lottery," someone muttered once behind him. Every comment hit like a brick. He stopped going out unless he had to. Not because of them, but because of how he saw himself now. The nights were the worst. He'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every dumb choice. The overpriced watches, the shallow dates, the ignored warnings. He had no one to blame. The anger turned inward, quiet, heavy, and constant. He missed his old friends, but he didn't dare reach out. What could he say after cutting them off so coldly? Inside that silence, a different kind of pain grew, the kind that forces change. Eric didn't cry for the cars or the house. He cried because he forgot who he was. He had chased validation, bought affection, and lost everything real in the process. Now, with nothing left to impress anyone, he was finally standing in front of the one person he couldn't avoid anymore, himself. One rainy afternoon, just when Eric thought no one would ever knock on his door again, someone did. It was Jake. his childhood best friend. The same Jake he hadn't spoken to since moving to LA in a Ferrari. He stood there, holding 2 coffees and wearing the same humble smile Eric remembered from years ago. There was no judgment in his eyes, just quiet understanding. They sat in the small kitchen, talking like no time had passed. Jake didn't bring up the tabloids or the rumors. He just asked, "How are you really?" That hit harder than any insult. Eric hesitated, then opened up, about the loneliness, the mistakes, and the guilt. For the first time, he wasn't talking to defend himself. He was just talking. Jake listened patiently, then leaned back and said something that caught Eric off guard. "I could use an extra set of hands at the shop." Eric blinked, confused. A job after everything. But Jake wasn't offering charity. He was offering a way forward. "You need structure. You need people. You need purpose," Jake said. And somehow Eric knew he was right. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with an audience or applause, but it was real. Eric paused for a moment, then nodded. That small nod felt bigger than any party he'd ever thrown. It was the first step toward rebuilding something meaningful. Not for the world to see, but for himself. The first day at the mechanic shop was humbling. Eric didn't know how to hold a wrench properly, and his clothes, once tailored and expensive, were now stained with grease. But something about the smell of oil, the sound of tools clinking, and the rhythm of work felt grounding. There was no red carpet, no fake praise, just honest labor and tired muscles. Each day tested him. He struggled to follow instructions, made rookie mistakes, and got laughed at by the younger guys. But it wasn't cruel. It was the kind of teasing that came with brotherhood. Over time, he started to understand the value of every dollar he earned. $10 for a meal now felt more satisfying than a $1,000 bottle he used to pop for strangers. Outside work, his lifestyle was simple. He rented a small apartment above a bakery, cooked his own meals, and walked to the shop. At night, he read books or sat quietly on the porch, watching the town move at its own quiet pace. He wasn't distracted by the noise of fame anymore. He was finally learning how to be present and at peace. Slowly, something shifted inside him. He smiled more. He laughed without needing a camera nearby. He stopped counting what he had lost and started noticing what he was gaining: trust, connection, and a sense of self that wasn't tied to wealth. For the first time in years, Eric felt genuinely happy, and it had nothing to do with money. Eric didn't want to go back to the flashy lifestyle that nearly destroyed him, but he did want to share what he had learned. He started small, creating videos in his spare time. At first, they were simple. Just him sitting in front of his camera, talking about how he lost it all and what he wished he had known. He didn't try to be an expert. He just shared his story with honesty. The feedback came slowly at first. A few comments here and there, people thanking him for being real. But as more viewers tuned in, the message started to resonate. "I'm in the same boat," one comment said. "I was living big, but I'm tired of chasing stuff that doesn't matter." Eric realized his story wasn't just his, it was everyone's. So many people had been caught up in the chase, thinking that wealth would bring fulfillment, only to find emptiness. With time, his small online presence began to grow. He gave practical advice on budgeting, saving, and investing in things that truly mattered. No flashy lifestyle, no promises of overnight riches, just real, down-to-earth advice. He shared his failures more than his wins, because that's what people connected with. They weren't looking for a miracle. They were looking for someone who could help them avoid the same mistakes. Soon, his followers grew loyal. They appreciated his vulnerability and the authenticity of his message. Eric wasn't just teaching them about managing money. He was teaching them about the value of purpose and living a life that wasn't measured by what you have, but by what you give. His side hustle turned into a full-time business, not because he chased success, but because he focused on helping others avoid the trap he once fell into. Years later, Eric found himself in a much different place. He had rebuilt his wealth, but this time it wasn't because of reckless spending or empty ambition. He was financially secure, but more importantly, he was at peace. His days were no longer filled with the rush of chasing status or filling a void with material things. He had a sense of purpose that had eluded him before, helping others avoid the same mistakes he once made. His business was thriving, but Eric kept his circle small and meaningful. The fake friends from his past were long gone, and in their place were people who shared his values. He was no longer interested in the glamour or the show. His focus was on building something that lasted, both in terms of wealth and relationships. Every decision he made had purpose, and he now measured success by how he impacted others, not just by the size of his bank account. Eric's story had come full circle. The same lessons he once ignored were now the foundation of his life. He was generous with his time, using his platform to mentor others who had struggled with financial mismanagement. People came to him not for handouts, but for advice and guidance on how to live a balanced life. And with each person he helped, Eric felt a deeper sense of fulfillment, the kind that no amount of money could ever buy. Now he could say with certainty that he was truly rich. Not because of the money, but because he had found a deeper meaning in life. He had learned the hard way that success wasn't about accumulating wealth. It was about the way you used it, the people you surrounded yourself with, and the purpose you found in helping others. Eric was no longer just a millionaire. He was someone who had truly discovered the value of life. If Eric's journey inspired you, imagine how much your own story could change by making smarter choices today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the Millionaire Breakthrough community. We've got more incredible stories of transformation and life lessons coming your way. And who knows, maybe the next breakthrough story will be yours.